They said the playground had been there long before the neighborhood was built. Tucked behind a row of dying oaks, hidden just beyond the old churchyard, the place seemed to exist in its own bubble of silence. It didn't have the vibrant colors, or the smooth plastic slides of modern parks. No, this one had rusted swing sets that creaked even when the wind stood still. Its merry-go-round spun by itself some nights, slowly, like it remembered being used. Locals called it Grayfield Park. No signs pointed to it. No one maintained it, and yet it was never overgrown. The grass never climbed the fences, the chains on the swings were always intact, and once every few years a child would go missing. They were always last seen near the park. Police said it was a coincidence. Parents called it a tragedy, but the older residents, they whispered something else. Something about the original builder, about the soil it stood on, about the fact that no one had ever seen a playground being built there. It had just appeared decades ago, and sometimes, when dusk settled like a shroud and the cicadas stopped singing, if you stood near the fence, you could still hear the laughter of children who were never found. The town of Marley's Hollow was the kind of place people drove through without noticing. A quiet slice of rural America nestled between two highways and surrounded by tired woods. The population sign had read 2103 for nearly 6 years. Nothing ever changed here. People didn't move in and they rarely moved out. But that summer, the one everyone would remember, something did change. That it started with a girl named Lila Crane. Lila was 11 years old, with straight-cut bangs and a collection of mismatched socks she proudly wore to school. She lived with her grandmother, Agnes, in a modest brick house on the edge of Hollow Creek Road. Her mother had passed when Lila was just a baby, and her father, well, no one really talked about him. But Agnes was strong, kind, and attentive. In her own sharp-edged way, she kept the house spotless, the meals warm, and Lila's imagination slightly in check. Lila, like most kids, had a fascination with the forbidden, and in Marley's Hollow nothing was more whispered about and more strictly avoided than the Grayfield playground. It wasn't on any map. It wasn't listed with the county parks, but every kid knew where it was. Tucked behind the mosque cemetery, past a crumbling stone arch no one could remember being built, the playground sat in a dip of earth like it had sunk there centuries ago. Lila had never seen it up close, only through distant glances when she dared to peek between the trees during walks to the store. There were stories, of course. Some said the playground took kids who stayed after sunset. Others believed the was cursed, that it spun in reverse when someone was about to vanish. The most outlandish tale claimed the sand in the sandbox was mixed with bone dust. Lila didn't believe in ghosts, or curses, or shadows that could reach out and touch you. She believed in science, in facts, in things she could see and prove. But she also believed in dares, and when Jason McHenry dared her to step into the playground after school, just once, just for 10 seconds, she accepted. "You won't do it," Jason had said, smug behind his bike handlebars. "You talk big, but you're just as scared as the rest of us." Lila's pride burned too hot to resist. That was a Wednesday. That night she came home quiet. Her grandmother noticed the smudge of dirt on her socks, the leaves tangled in her hair. Lila didn't say much during dinner. When asked about school, she just nodded. When asked about the park, she didn't flinch. But later, Agnes would remember the way her granddaughter stood by the window for a long time after sunset, just watching. The next morning, Lila woke up crying, not loud, not hysterical, just tears, slow and steady, down her cheeks. When Agnes asked her what was wrong, Lila said, "He was calling from the swing but his mouth didn't move." Agnes chalked it up to a nightmare, a child's mind playing tricks. But something changed in Lila after that. She didn't eat as much. She stopped wearing her favorite socks. Her drawings, once colorful bursts of imagination, turned dark. Trees with hollow faces, slides that bent into open jaws, a roundabout with arms. At school, her teachers noticed she flinched at recess. Whistles, she wouldn't go near the monkey bars. She refused to play hide dash and dash seek. Then she started asking strange questions. Do shadows have names? What happens to laughter when no one hears it? Can places be hungry? One day, Lila came home with dirt under her fingernails and scratches on her arms. When Agnes questioned her, Lila simply said, "He needed help finding his head." That same week, Agnes visited the church. She asked Father Mallory, a gentleman in his 70s, if he remembered anything about the playground's origins. He looked uncomfortable. "I wouldn't go asking questions about that place," he said. "Some things are best left alone, but children keep disappearing," she whispered. Father Mallory's face hardened. "And they always will if you keep pretending it's just a place." The next day, Lila was gone. Agnes found the back door open. Muddy footprints in the hallway, and the faintest sound, a slow, metallic creaking coming from somewhere far off in the woods. The police searched for days. Dogs were brought in, flyers were posted. Volunteers walked the entire perimeter of town, but no one found Lila. No one ever had. Agnes became quiet after that. She stopped baking, she stopped tending to her flowers. Neighbors said they'd sometimes see her standing at the edge of the cemetery at dusk, clutching something small in her hand, a sock, maybe whispering to herself. And once, just once, someone claimed they saw her step past the trees and vanish into the direction of the playground. She never came back either. No one spoke of it out loud, but the children of Marley's Hollow knew. They passed it down like a rule of survival. Never follow the laughter, never answer the swing, and never ever stay after sunset. 3 years after Lila's disappearance, the town had almost convinced itself it had moved on. Almost new families moved into Marley's Hollow, lured by its charm and low cost of living. One such family was the Hartleys. Daniel, a history teacher, Claire, a freelance editor, and their 8-year-old son, Owen. They were new enough not to know the stories. The Hartleys bought a modest 2-story home on the west side of town, not far from Hollow Creek Road. To them, the house was a peaceful escape from city life. The neighbors were friendly, the air was clean, and the backyard opened into a stretch of trees that Owen immediately claimed as his exploration zone. But it didn't take long before strange things began to unfold. It started innocently. One evening, Claire found a crayon drawing tucked under Owen's pillow. It wasn't his usual cheerful stick figures. This one showed a swing set, crooked, rusted, and surrounded by tall trees. In the swing sat a boy with no face. Above him were words scribbled in red. "Come play with me." Claire asked Owen where he'd seen the swing set. He smiled and said, "Behind the trees, where the laughter is." Daniel dismissed it as a child's imagination, but Claire's unease grew when, a few days later, Owen began waking up in the middle of the night, always at 2:17 a.m., staring at the corner of his room, silent, frozen. When asked why, he whispered, "That's when he swings." One afternoon, Claire followed Owen as he ventured into the woods behind their home. She intended to call him back, but something stopped her, a scent in the air, sharp and metallic, like blood in cold water. She saw him disappear behind a wall of ivy. She pushed through it and froze there. Surrounded by gnarled trees and half-buried gravestones was the playground. She hadn't even known it was there. There were no paths, no signs, no noise, just the faint groan of rusted chains and the occasional chirp of crows. It looked exactly like Owen's drawing. The slide was steep, shaped like a tongue. The merry-go-round leaned slightly, its surface pitted and scarred, and the swing moved, back and forth, slow, without wind, as if someone or something was sitting in it. Claire stepped closer. "Owen," she called. No answer. She circled the playground once, panic rising in her throat. Then she saw him sitting cross-legged at the base of the seesaw, whispering into the dirt. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm listening," he said, without turning. "He's teaching me how to stay." Claire didn't know how she got him home. Her memories of that moment blurred like a smeared photo. She only remembered blinking and suddenly finding herself in the hallway, clutching Owen's muddy hand. That night, Claire did what any mother would do. She searched online, and what she found chilled her more than the cold earth of the woods ever could. There were forums, dozens of them. Parents from Marley's Hollow, some recent, some long gone, sharing nearly identical stories. Children hearing whispers, drawings of a faceless boy, unmarked playgrounds that no longer appeared on maps but still existed in the trees. And the most terrifying thread of all, a local urban legend known as the playmate. According to whispers passed down for decades, the playmate was once a child himself, a lonely boy buried in the early 1900s. After dying tragically near the site of an old traveling carnival, no one knew exactly how he died, but one thing was consistent in the accounts. His grave was never marked. Instead, it was said that the land consumed him. Years later, when developers cleared the woods to build the church and nearby homes, the clearing where the carnival had once stood remained untouched. Construction workers refused to work there. Equipment malfunctioned. One man was found unconscious on the merry-go-round, mumbling about invisible hands, pulling, and then came the disappearances. The first was a boy named Tommy in 1952, then Lisa, 1968, another in 1981. All vanished near the same location, behind the cemetery, past the ivy. Each child had complained about hearing laughter at night. Each had been seen drawing the same crooked swing, and every single one of them had whispered a name. Before vanishing, Benjamin. Claire closed her laptop and looked at her son. He sat at the kitchen table, humming a song she'd never taught him, off-key, old-fashioned, almost like a nursery rhyme sung backward. She called Daniel at work. "We're leaving," she said. Tonight. Daniel, practical and logical, insisted she was overreacting, but when she played the old voice recording on her phone, the one she had accidentally recorded when confronting Owen at the park, he fell silent. A soft, low voice played from her phone. "Stay and swing. Stay and swing, stay." And in the background, the sound of chains creaking. Not one swing, two. That night, Owen disappeared. They'd locked the doors, closed the windows. Claire had even placed salt along the threshold, something she read in one of the old forum posts. But at exactly 2:17 a.m., Claire awoke to the sound of a swing squealing outside the backyard. She ran to the window. Owen stood in the grass, staring toward the trees. His mouth moved, and then in slow jerking steps he walked backward into the forest. Claire screamed it. By the time they reached the woods, Owen was gone. Only his socks remained. One red, one yellow dot. The police came, searched, questioned, but, just like all the others before him, Owen was never found. In the weeks that followed, Claire stopped speaking. Daniel stayed up all night, flashlight in hand, scouring the trees. But the playground never appeared again, not to them, only to children. Then, one afternoon, months later, a new family moved into town. The Cartwrights. They had a daughter, 7 years old, quiet, bright, curious. The neighbors watched as the little girl skipped down Hollow Creek Road, and on her third day in town she came home with a drawing. It was of a swing set in the woods. A boy stood beside it, smiling. She had drawn his name in block letters at the bottom. Benjamin. The little girl's name was Emily Cartwright. She was clever, observant, and drawn to quiet corners most kids avoided. From the moment her family moved into Marley's Hollow, Emily began exploring the woods behind their new home. The same woods Owen Hartley had disappeared into months before. Her parents didn't worry at first. The trees seemed safe enough, and Emily had always had an imaginary friend or two, but they noticed something strange almost immediately. She stopped bringing her toys outside. When asked why, she simply said, "He doesn't like them." Instead, she brought paper, crayons. She'd sit for hours near the trees, drawing in silence. Her sketches were always the same, a boy with a soft smile and hollow eyes. Sometimes he stood on a swing, other times he crouched beneath the merry-go-round. He wore old clothes, always torn and dusty, and his hands were long. Too long. His name was always written underneath Benjamin. One evening, her father followed her quietly through the brush. She hadn't seen him watching. He simply wanted to be sure she wasn't wandering too far. Emily walked slowly, whispering softly to herself, but when she reached the ivy curtain behind the cemetery, she stopped. Her voice grew louder, clearer, as if she was speaking to someone. Her father froze. There was a rustle, not from Emily but from the trees ahead. Then a voice, a low child's voice, impossibly close, responding to her. "Do they know yet?" "No," Emily replied. "They never do." Her father nearly stumbled backward, the breath caught in his throat. When he looked again, Emily was alone, smiling and staring straight at him. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "You're too old." That night her drawings changed. Now, she was in them, standing beside Benjamin, holding his hand. The playground became clearer, too. The slide now twisted like a serpent. The seesaw became a broken bone. The sandbox no longer held toys, just teeth. Her parents planned to take her away, back to the city. But Emily didn't want to go. "The playground will miss me," she said. And then came the letter, folded beneath Emily's pillow, written in a tight, scratchy hand that wasn't hers. It wasn't signed, but the words etched into the paper chilled her mother to the core. "She belongs to the land now, as all the lost ones do. We don't take them, we invite them." The same night, Claire Hartley, Owen's mother, returned. No one had seen her since her son vanished, but she looked different now. Older, thinner, eyes that had seen beyond reason. She knocked on the Cartwright's door just before midnight. "I saw your daughter," she said, "in the woods. She's already partway gone." Emily's mother, terrified, demanded answers. Claire didn't flinch. "There's something about that place," she whispered. "It chooses children, lonely ones, curious ones, the ones who hear what adults can't." She handed Emily's mother an old photograph, a black and white image of the playground from decades ago. In the background, among the shadows, a small figure stood just off-center, barefoot, grinning. That it was Benjamin. "Even then, he never left," Claire said. "He just changes. Every few years. waiting for the next one to stay. She hesitated, then added, "He was once a victim, but now, he's something else." The next morning, Emily was gone, no signs of struggle. Her window was locked, her bed neatly made. But one thing was different. The ivy curtain behind the cemetery was torn open. The town searched again. Flyers were posted, dogs brought in, but nothing was found, except one thing in the center of the playground, which had once again made itself visible, just long enough to be found, sat a single crayon drawing, weather-worn, curled at the edges. In it, Emily and Benjamin stood side by side beneath the swing set. Both were smiling. Below them, in red crayon, Emily had written, "Now, it's my turn to invite." The town grew quieter after that. The police stopped responding to playground reports. Parents warned their children, but the laughter still echoed through the trees at dusk. And every few years, when the summer heat thickens and the sky turns yellow before the storm, a child disappears. Sometimes their voice is heard one last time, sometimes it's laughter, other times it's a whisper, "Come play." Years passed. Marley's hollow aged like a forgotten photograph, colors fading, corners curling. The woods behind the cemetery thickened, and new families moved in unaware of what lay hidden beyond the ivy. The Hartleys moved away. No one blamed them. The Cartwrights, too, disappeared from memory, as if they had never lived there. Their house sat empty for a while, then sold cheap to an older couple who kept the windows shut and the curtains drawn tight. Children avoided the place on instinct alone, but the playground remained. Most days, it wasn't there, not to adults at least. It stayed veiled behind time and trees, only visible when it wanted to be. But sometimes, just after a storm or during those windless, electric evenings before twilight truly settles in, you might hear it. The squeal of metal, the creak of a chain, a faint giggle carried low through the pine needles. And if you listen closely, if you press your ear to the cool bark of a certain crooked tree near the cemetery wall, you might hear names whispered from within the roots. Lila, Owen, Emily, all part of a new chorus now. Some towns forget their tragedies, others bury them, but Marley's hollow simply absorbs them, folds them gently into the soil, into the rust, into the tireless motion of a swing that doesn't need wind. Some say it's a curse, others believe it's a living thing. The land, the grief, the silence, fused into something hungry but patient, waiting, and in the quiet spaces between dusk and dark, it chooses another, not out of rage, not out of malice, but because it is lonely and it needs someone to play with. On a still summer evening, long after the sun had dipped below the treetops and the world had fallen into hush, a new child wandered too close to the edge of the woods, drawn by a sound they couldn't quite name, a giggle, a swing, a whisper. And in that final sliver of fading light, the ivy parted without touch, the rusted gate opened without hands, and the playground welcomed another. Because the thing about Greyfield Park is it never forgets a child who once dared to listen.